Occasionally, I find it helpful to stand back a bit and gain a broader look at my general position on things. As I step back and comprehend the requirements of Jesus from that wider perspective, I see three primary hinge points in his teaching. The third hinge point is found in what is often called the Great Commission. It's in Matthew chapter 28, and the point? Go make disciples. It's the favorite hinge point of my evangelical tribe, and we've made a life's work of disciple-making projects. The second hinge point, also in Matthew chapter 22 and elsewhere, we call it the Great Commandment. The point there? Love God supremely and love people. I note that while we people of faith talk about these directives as a whole, we don't perform all that well. But the first hinge point, found in Matthew and in Mark, is recorded among Jesus' first encounters with the men who would become his early disciples. "Follow me," he said, "and I will show you how to influence people." It seems from my broad look that the rest of his teaching and that of the greater New Testament is essentially an amplification of these three essentials. Follow me, love God and people, and make disciples. So here's my observation and my question. How can we make disciples if we don't love people? And how can we learn to love people if we don't love God? And how can we learn to love God if we don't follow Jesus? I think there's a reason he introduced these essentials in the order we find them. So it comes down to the first and, in my estimation, the most important of these three hinge points. Follow me, and I will show you how. I've thought about those words for a long time. It seems to me that if we ever got the following part right, the loving and disciple-making parts would flow naturally from it. So I want to tell you a story of how I came to understand what following Jesus means. It's a story that took 60 years to form. When I was a boy in the 1950s, my parents gave me a book entitled World War II Flying Aces. I read it so many times that the pages became dog-eared and stained and loose from the binding. Those men became my heroes, and the machines they flew, my passion. One of those machines captured all of my imagination. It was called Mustang. The P-51 Mustang was the most capable propeller-driven aircraft of its era. Sleek lines, massive power, distinctive sound, unmatched maneuverability. It is, in my estimation, one of the finest aircraft ever designed in any era. I flew that Mustang. No, that's not right. I soared in the Mustang, in my dreams, and in my imagination, and still do. But the course of life assigned to me did not include the need to become a pilot, although I did learn to fly out of an incurable curiosity about how to do it. But the awesome and beautiful Mustang remained in the safest of places, in my dreams. It was Christmas morning of my 60th year, opening a card from my wife. On it was a picture of a P-51 Mustang. The short of the tale is that Marilyn and our children had co-opted to provide a flight in the airplane of my dreams. Let's just say, it was a moment. So what I tell you next is the fulfillment of a 50-year dream and the most impactful God lesson of my adult life. What I thought would be a sit and fly around was, in fact, a full aerobatic flight lesson. The aircraft was a 1945 D model converted for training. We went through an extensive orientation on the ground, then buckled in. I had the back seat with a set of controls, and my instructor, John, had the front. John went meticulously through the checklist, always a good idea in a 65-year-old airplane, occasionally asking my opinion on the readiness of essential operational parts, the names and specific function of which I did not fully comprehend, so I said they looked good, figuring that was the quickest way to the sky. Apparently, John agreed, and after a few minutes, I heard a whine and saw that massive four-bladed prop begin to rotate. A supercharged 12-cylinder Merlin engine has a distinctive sound when heard from the ground, but in the cockpit, it isn't the sound you notice. It's that 2,000 horsepower part spinning on the nose. You actually have to counter-torque the rudder to keep the thing straight. As we taxied to the runway, John came over the radio with the first of 4 impacting statements that day. "Mark," he said, "there's something real important I want you to understand. This is my airplane, not yours. But I want you to fly it. So do what I tell you to do, when I tell you to do it, and you will have the most marvelous experience of your life. You will fly this Mustang." "Yes, sir." It was the best response I could think of. I figured Roger was a bit too cliche and the old trucker 10-4 would just be embarrassingly wrong. So yes, sir, it was. John lined up on the center line, advanced the throttle, whipped up all 2,000 of the horses, and in a rush of seconds in gray concrete, we were airborne. At about 500 feet, John wiggled the stick and said, "The aircraft is yours." I had been waiting for those words for 50 years. I was flying a P-51 Mustang, hands on stick, feet on rudder. "I have the aircraft," I replied, and the grin was from ear to ear. Then John gave the second of the 4 pronouncements. "If you feel resistance on the stick or the rudder, don't fight it. It's me keeping you out of trouble." That sounded like a really good idea. Yes, sir. We gained altitude, and for the next hour, John talked me through maneuvers with that airplane that are hard to adequately describe. I could try, but that's not the point of this story. Let's just say that a 4G turn upside down in a P-51 Mustang is just about the coolest thing in the cool book. As I pulled level out of the last roll, John said there was one more thing I needed to learn. I was to follow another aircraft. He gave me heading and altitude, and I flew us to the sighting of the other ship. And in accordance with my understanding of following, I took up a position about a quarter mile back and a couple of 100 feet above the other plane. I was following. I had him in sight. I was going the same direction, and it seemed prudent to maintain plenty of room between us. Then came pronouncement number 3. John said, "That's not how we follow. Pull level on his left." As I completed the move, still about a quarter mile out, he asked, "Do you see the star on the side of his fuselage?" "Yes, sir." "Look out your right wing. You see the wing light on the tip?" "Yes, sir." John said, "I want you to put your light in his star and keep it there." John? We'd have to be pretty close to do that." "Precisely," he said. Then started a pretty shaky attempt to comply with my instructor. It's easy to fly solo flips and loops. All you have to do is pull back on the stick. The airplane does the rest. But the light and the star thing, that requires discipline and skill that I didn't have. And it required that I close to within feet of another airplane and submit myself to the discretion of that pilot, neither of which I was particularly keen on doing. As I clumsily and slowly closed the distance between the 2 planes, John delivered impact statement number 4. "Mark, I know this feels unnatural, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Now put your light in his star and keep it there. Match him move for move. It's the only job you have." And that's when it hit me. That's what Jesus meant when he said, "Follow me, and I'll show you how." I've reflected on that moment. Following Jesus is not done from some removed position so distant that Jesus cannot be immediately experienced, and from which we who presume to follow try to control the degree to which we comply with His directives. Following Jesus is a matter of position and proximity. The position is subservient, and the proximity is extremely close, so that when others look for Jesus, they see us. And when others look for us, they see Jesus. The leader and the follower move as one. I can assure you that putting one's moving light in another's moving star and keeping it there is a matter requiring intense concentration. I wasn't looking around much. My attention in the sky that day was riveted upon maintaining position and proximity. So it is with following Jesus. He doesn't interrupt our following to send us off to fly loops and flips and impress Him with our skills. He gives us assignments and leads us into and through and beyond engagements, most often into seemingly impossible engagements, requiring ever more dependence upon Him. Follow me, He said. I'll show you how. So there's my story. It took 60 years to tell it. This life you're enjoying is mine, not yours, Jesus says. But I want you to live it. So do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. And you will have the most marvelous experience. You will live this life fully and beyond your imagination. If you feel resistance on the controls, don't fight it. It's me keeping you out of trouble. Now pull level with me, close up, just off my shoulder. Put your light in my star and keep it there. I know this feels unnatural, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Now, put your light in my star and keep it there. Match me move for move. It's the only job you have. There is an addendum to my story. I told this story in the hearing of a friend who'd been an F-4 Phantom pilot in Vietnam. He pulled me aside and said, "You know that light in the star thing? It saved my life one night." Here's what he told me, as best I can recall. We were returning from a night mission over North Vietnam in heavy weather. We were in two-ship formations, flying on instruments. I had sustained some damage, and on the way home, my systems went down. I had engines and controls, but I couldn't see anything. Had no idea where I was or what direction I was going or how I was flying. The only thing I could see was a fleeting glimpse of light from the cockpit of my wingman, and I moved toward it, took position alongside. He said it was crazy how close we were flying, but it was the only way home. Many who will hear this story, including the teller, face situations that seem impossible. In the midst of those times, Jesus reminds, "Follow me." I know this feels unnatural, but the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Now, put your light in my star. Keep it there. Match me move for move. It's the only job you have. I'll get you home.